All right. So Flask, we've kind of been talking a little bit about Flask already, but Flask, and I guess let me give a little bit of a background. Flask is a web framework. So a lot of people using it. In fact, I want to say like even I'm pretty sure Pinterest is built on Flask. Actually, I know there's lots, but Pinterest is the one that immediately comes to mind. And what's nice about it is you build your web app with Python. Um, and there's pros and cons to every web framework, but Flask is particularly good for data, I think, because it's great for APIs, it's great for data, because Python's a great language for handling data, I truly believe, and I just like it. It's nice and easy to set up. It's very extensible, but it can be very lean. So like in my job, we actually have one server that probably has 6 different Flask apps running on it just for little tiny things, like something as simple as um, looking up GPAs, what they were on a specific day, kind of a thing, little small tasks. And a lot of times we'll build a Flask app and pile a lot of stuff into it. Yeah. And like Matthew said, Python is disgustingly easy to learn. It's great. If you've never programmed before, Python is fantastic. And the great part about Python is it's not like it's some entry level language as far as like the industry is concerned. Like if you know Python and you know Python well, that's a marketable skill because people use it all over. Um, a large port. So I do a lot of data analytics, and all of my data analytics is done in R, which is just a Python library. So, and I write many of my scripts for data analytics in Python. And so Python is just great. It's just a great language. So, what we're going to be doing in this lab is we're starting off with we're going to build it from the ground up. We're starting from nothing, right? And we're going to set up a Linux server. So you're gonna do a little bit of Linux, and don't get too scared. It's pretty easy, and all the instructions are laid out. And so, like even if you need to look up the instructions every time you do it, that's fine, because eventually it'll get better. But it's fine. I mean, we can't all be experts at everything, but we can just get better all the time. So don't be too afraid, because I have every step in this whole tutorial listed out. There will never be like a time where you're like, oh, I have to figure this out myself. As long as you follow the instructions, it'll work out perfect. So we're going to set up a Linux server with a web server, and the web server is what delivers files to us when we go to it with a web browser. So this web page we're looking at right now actually is being served by Apache, which is an open source web server application that runs on Linux, and you're going to be blown away how easy it is to install. So for those of you who don't have a website or don't pay for hosting, you're going to be like, wow, I can just set up my own so easy. Which is actually, this website we're looking at right now is actually running on a computer right behind me for the same reason. So we're going to do Apache, and we're going to use a little module called WSGI, which isn't too much a concern. But then our database is going to be actually built with Postgres. And Postgres, the reason I like Postgres is because it's open source and free, which number one is the biggest thing. So in the class, we've been using Oracle, and Oracle is a great product, but it is very expensive. And so if you're like me and you need to build stuff, but you don't want to pay for it, Postgres is amazing. It's open source, it's free, but it's feature rich, which is a big deal to me, because I get used to, because all day at work, I work with Oracle, I work with Microsoft SQL Server. And so I got used to all these features and abilities. And then if I went to, because for example, not dissing on MySQL, but a lot of people go with MySQL because it's kind of the poster child of open source databases because it's been around a while. But the problem is it's kind of, it's lacking many features because it's actually developed by Oracle. And it is free. It is nice, but it does lack some features. So that's why we're going with Postgres, and Postgres is more similar to Oracle as far as syntax goes. So we're gonna use Postgres, and it's just as easy to set up and manage. And then lastly, we're going to use Flask as our backend. And then on top of Flask, it's going to use HTML and CSS, obviously, just like anything. And we're actually going to be using Twitter Bootstrap in this tutorial, just because it makes building websites just so much nicer. If you've never heard of Twitter Bootstrap. It is just pre-built CSS classes that you can just use, and it's really nice. But anyways, that's kind of where we're going to get started. And just so you know, the end goal in all this is that we are building a database, little web framework that's actually going to, it's kind of simple. Basically, we're putting a course catalog. So you can imagine if, let's say it's a high school, let's say it's a college, they want a browsable course catalog that they can display. But obviously we want it built on a database so we can make changes. Maybe we make it our master course database so that when we do course planning, maybe we expand it to more functionality. But for right now, we just want a browsable course catalog and an editable one. We want people to be able to edit this course catalog through the web browser, which is what we're going to be doing just a little bit. So let's jump in. So there's two parts to this lab, essentially. The first part, and I kind of just split it up just to make it a little bit easier because there is kind of two bits. The part one is we're just getting Flask up and running to the point where we can go to a web page and it says, oh, hey, look, I'm running Flask, essentially. And then part two is where we're actually going to focus on building in there. So part one is really just a lot of setup, getting prepared. And then part two is where we're actually going to be building. And we're going to do this all tonight. I'm going to walk through it all. And then I'm hoping that we can move quick enough that when we get to part two, we can actually talk about the database design. Because it's actually all there for us, but I'd like to explain it so that way, as you guys go out and start building your own stuff, you know what you're doing. So we're going to jump right into step one, and we are going to get Ubuntu server running as a virtual machine. So we all have VMware Player because we're part of the class. But in the future, let's say you don't have VMware Player or Workstation or Fusion, you can always use VirtualBox. So I have VirtualBox listed here. I used to use VirtualBox because I'm a Linux, and VMware Workstation didn't used to work on Linux, but VMware Player does now. So I'm actually going to do mine in VMware Player. My previous videos were all done in VirtualBox, so you can find an example for both. But then the other thing you're going to need is the Ubuntu server. Now, Ubuntu has a, they don't do a rolling release. So they have what's called LTS versions, which is long-term support. And so if you're running a server, you want that to be on the LTS because it's going to last a long time. So there's a link right here you can go to and get that .iso file. And that's going to be important. When you get there, my link goes straight there, but if you just Google Ubuntu server download, it'll take you to a place like this. And we want to get to Ubuntu server. You click on option 3 and it'll get you a download Ubuntu server 20.04.1 LTS. The reason we're going to use Ubuntu is because I use Debian all day. And so I'm really used to it, but Ubuntu is a pretty big name in the Linux world. And it's also what I consider to be the easiest for beginners. So that's why we're going to use it. So, and then I have some instructions, and I apologize because I just wrote up the VMware Player ones recently. So VirtualBox has a couple screenshots, but VMware Player doesn't, but we're going to walk through right now. So once you get the Ubuntu server downloaded, you're going to want to save that to a good permanent place. So like I happen to put mine in a folder with my other CIT virtual machines. So I just put mine in a folder called images, and you can see that my Ubuntu server 20 is right here, 2004. And then I'm going to open up VMware Player. All right. And this is where we get to start building. We're going to set up our stuff, and let's remind me later. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new virtual machine. And then we're going to say use an ISO image. So I'm going to browse to my folder here. So I'm going to go to my home directory and under images. And then I'm going to find that file I just downloaded, that ISO, Ubuntu 2004. And it's only a 900 megabyte file. They do have torrents if you're on a sketchy internet connection. But Ubuntu server, we're going to open that. And here we go. So let's hit next. And now here is where we can basically, VMware is going to do a little bit for us. We actually won't have to do as much because it recognizes, hey, you're using Ubuntu server. I can do some of the work for you. So we're going to let it. So we're going to choose. This is where we're actually going to build our user. So I'm just going to let it autofill that stuff for me. And I'm going to type in a password. And my password, let's do, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I better just do it's not. I'm going to put my password as developer. But you can put whatever you want. All right, and then this is where we can choose where we want it to save. And I'm just going to leave mine default, but I am going to rename this. I'm going to say Ubuntu server. And you don't have to do that. I'm just doing it because I already have one. You can leave all that default if you want, or you can name it whatever you want. All right, and this is our disk space, and this is where we just choose how big we want it to be. Now, technically, we don't need much. I'm going to leave mine at 20 gigs, and I'm going to select this checkbox that says store virtual disk as a single file. Just that way, it's a little bit easier to move if you ever decide to. And this is just kind of like a temporary development server, nothing crazy. So 20 gigs will be ample for what we need. And it's actually not going to use 20 gigs right now. It will increase as we, see, it says these files will start small and become larger. So it will only use actually what we need. Then we hit next, and then we're left with this screen. Now you could leave this if you want to, but I'm going to recommend we change it. And the reason being is we actually don't need 4 gigs of RAM. So we're not going to use 4 gigs of RAM. We're going to set it to 2048, which is 2 gigs of RAM. And the reason we're going to do that is, like I said, we don't need more than 2 gigs. It's just a development server. The 2 gigs will be ample for what we need. So we're going to leave it at that. And then also on our network adapter, if you want to connect to this as its own computer, we're going to change this from NAT to bridged. We're going to just check that radial for a bridge connection, because then it's going to show up like another computer on the network, which is great. Then at that point, we can just hit close, and we're going to let it automatically power it on, and we're going to click finish. And remind me later. And this is actually going to boot your server. Now, the one thing that we need to be aware of is that with a server, there isn't buttons and a mouse or anything like that. We have to do everything with a keyboard, which I'll show you again. It's not too crazy. It'll be pretty straightforward. We'll give it a second here to get ready. All right. And now we're to the installer. Let me see if we can see this here. Make this a little bigger. We're to the installer. And so then this is kind of just like, we're just going to walk through, and just so you know, you use your arrow keys on your keyboard, and then enter when you're ready to make a selection. So hit enter. We can update to the new installer. I'm going to continue without updating. I'm just going to, just for the sake of time, we'll select our keyboard. English is great. And here we can see my IP address. And now this is important. We want to make sure we remember this. So mine is 10.0.0.65. Yours might be different because it'll be whatever network you're on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit done. We're going to leave the proxy blank. We're going to leave that just right there. We're going to keep that exactly how it is. Now, if you get to something like this, you can arrow down all the way to the bottom. If you want to checkbox something, you hit the space bar. You can see how I'm doing that, but we're going to leave everything default. So we're going to mouse arrow down till done, hit enter, and everything's still good. We're just going to leave that all just like that. So we're going to hit done and continue. Now this is where we're going to set some stuff. Our server name is going to be dev. I'm going to set my username, set a password. Again, I'm just going to do this developer. And then hit done. Now, this is an important step. If you want to SSH to your server instead of use this window, which I'm going to do, you want to make sure you tick the box on install open SSH server. And just so you know, since I forgot to say it, all this is spelled out exactly as we walked through just now. So we're on step 10. So it's not going to be too crazy. It's not like you need to be writing all this down. All right, we're just going to skip all this. We're going to hit done. And now it's installing Ubuntu server. Does anyone have any questions up to this point? And I know it's not up to this point, it's not too crazy and every step is spelled out on here, but does anyone have any questions about what we're doing, why we're doing it this way, anything like that? I will say real quick that this is actually a great skill to know if you're going into like development world or sysadmin world or anything like that, because it's everybody now is pretty much running development servers. And a lot of times you have to set up your own. So like at my last job, I had my own desktop computer. And then right next to my desktop, I actually had another tower that was just for running virtual machines on for development and testing servers, which is exactly what we're doing now. So I actually did this all the time. And I'm going to cancel the security updates and reboot for the sake of time for the video. If it'll let me, might be too late. Oh, and I guess I need to click on it. There we go. So I'm going to just cancel that. You can let yours finish if you want. It's really doesn't really matter either way, because we're on a virtual machine. The only people that will be able to see this virtual machine are people on your network, which for me is just my house. So the other great thing about Linux while we're waiting is Linux is extremely safe and secure if properly configured, like anything. But it's also very great for development. So we are right here on step 12. So we're going to be going into this step right here. Maybe it would have been faster to let it just finish the update. I don't know. We'll see. We will see. I guess while we're waiting for that, I will explain a little bit of this, because you're going to see me actually connect to this virtual machine through my terminal application. And because I'm running Linux, I have a terminal application. If you're on a Mac, you can also SSH just right from your terminal. If you're on Windows, you have to install something extra. But if you're on Windows, you can actually get a Ubuntu terminal on Windows. So if you go into the Windows Store, you can actually do a search for Ubuntu, and it will install a terminal for you. And actually, I want to say that PowerShell now supports SSH as well. So if you're on Windows, you can SSH if you use the PowerShell terminal, or you can install the Ubuntu one. Completely up to you. The fact of the matter is, once we get logged in, it's not going to matter either way, because we're going to be on our server, not actually on our host computer. We'll give this just a minute to finish, hopefully before too long. It does say rebooting, so. Okay, so it is finishing its little update. Basically what it's doing is it's building all the files it needs for the kernel. keep watching this terminal output and see what we can actually see. Oh, there it is. It looks like it's done. There we go. All right, now we are all started up. As soon as you see this dev login, you know that we are good. That means we're all booted up, and might kick a few more things out, especially on this first boot, things that are still kind of running in the background. You can just hit return and it'll bring up the prompt again. And this is where we log in. So I did my username is Tanner Crook, and my password was developer. And then we're logged in now. And so now we can do everything right here in this window if we wanted, because this is a terminal itself. But I like to have mine all color coded and nice and not have to worry about it. So I'm actually going to do that. But one thing that we need to do is get our IP address. Now, when we first log in, we can actually see the IP address here. Now, again, I can't highlight this because it catches my mouse cursor. But you can actually see my IP address on the screen right in the middle. If you see my mouse cursor right here, it's just to the left of here. It says IPv4 address for ends 33, and that's 10.0.0.65. But if we ever need a reminder, we can actually just type IP space address, and it will actually tell us that we just have to look for the right one. So mine's actually listing number 2, and it's 10.0.0.65. So that's our IP address. And so now I'm actually going to connect from my computer to the virtual machine. So I'm going to do that with SSH. And so I just type in SSH space my username at 10.0.65. So the IP address, and then we hit return. And it's going to say, hey, I don't know who this is. I've never connected them before. Are you sure you want to do this? And I say yes. And then this is where we type our password. So mine is developer. And you can see we get a very similar prompt. Well, it's exactly the same. And there's the IP address now that I can highlight it. So if you can use your built-in terminal, because it just makes it a little nicer, because then the nice thing is at this point, we can just minimize this and we don't have to look at it anymore. And just like that, our virtual machine with Ubuntu server is up and running. So now we are going to move into our next little section because we got this done. Now we're going to start installing our components. So LAMP, the name of this lab is a LAMP stack. And that's because LAMP is a pretty common thing because it stands for Linux, Apache. I like to say the M stands for model. Traditionally, it stands for MySQL is pretty popular for the M, but ours is Postgres. We're going to say model for the database. And then the P stands for PHP traditionally, but more modern practice. We're going to go with Python. So, but that's our LAMP stack. And kind of have it right here. So we have Ubuntu server. Ours is a little bit newer version than 1804. Apache, our model, and then Python. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure all of our operating system is up to date. Now, I know specifically for, if you wrote a whole website in PHP, you're going to love this. I'm excited to show you because it will make a huge difference. You'll love it. Let me actually real quick, I'm just going to up the font size on my stuff here real quick. Let's put it to 30 maybe. Okay. Yeah, you're going to love this because we can do templating and all sorts of cool stuff. Flask is amazing. So the first thing we want to do is update. And if you're normally updates are one of those things that make you kind of scared a little bit, but it's not too bad. And so to update, we just have to issue 2 commands. The first command, sudo apt update, is going to just check in with all the stuff that we have. And it's going to It's basically going to make sure that we have all the right URLs to get download packages. So apt update will make sure our packages are connecting to the right place. And then you'll notice that we get here and it says so many packages can be upgraded. And that means that we can upgrade some of our software. And so then we would issue this command. Now, for the sake of the video, again, I'm going to skip this step. You can feel free to skip this step too if you want, but if you want the latest software, apt upgrade will get you there. But it will take just like 5 minutes or less, probably more like 2. So you can do that if you want. But we're going to skip it. Just pretend we did it for right now. And the next step is we are going to install our web server. So if you wanted to host your own website, you're already like most of the way there. And so in Linux, to install something, the easiest way is to issue a command. And on the server, we don't have any other option. So we are just going to type sudo apt install Apache 2. And watch how fast this is. No going to websites, no downloading anything. I just issue this command, and in about 30 seconds, we will have, not even 30 seconds apparently, we have a web server. Just like that, we can host our own website now. And in fact, we actually already are. So let's look at what our IP address was again. So IP space address. My IP address is this 10.0.0.65. So I'm going to take and copy this, and let's just throw this into my local browser here. And you'll notice that we get this default web page. And so at this point, we're actually running our own web server. And just to kind of prove the point here, I'm actually going to go to where that website is stored, and it's under var www. So if we type cd space var www, we have this HTML folder. So if I go into HTML, here's index.html. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that index.html to back, index.html to index.html.back. And you'll notice that it says permission denied. And that's because I don't have permissions to this file. But since we are the root user, we can elevate our privileges with the sudo command. So we can type sudo space, and then let's just type that same command. So we're going to basically rename that file. We're going to back it up just so it's there. And then we're going to create a new index.html file. And again, we have to use sudo touch index.html. Oops. We don't want HTML.back. We want HTML. There we go. And now I'm going to edit this file real quick. So I'm going to do sudo nano index.html. And let's just real quick write ourselves just a real quick little web page here. We're just going to say, hello, world. And I'm going to save that file. And we're going to reload this web page. And what do you know? It says, hello, world. And so we're running our own web server. So at this point, we could start building a website. But since we're building a web application, we're going to have a lot more going on. So we still have a little bit more setup to do. But you want to make sure we test this, make sure everything's up and going. So to this point, you don't have to rename the index.html. As long as you get the Ubuntu web page, you know you're up and running. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we have our database installed. So we are going to install Postgres. And again, it's just as simple as sudo apt install PostgreSQL PostgreSQL-contrib. Say yes to make sure we get them all. And we are downloading and going to install Postgres. And just like that, one command, and we have a database running on our server, which is pretty neat. And like I said, I think a lot of especially I remember, as a early student, I like dreamt of being able to build things. I was so excited just to like build things and do things. But I always felt like all this stuff was out of my reach, or and really it's pretty easy. And so I hope that you kind of get that feeling so you can start doing stuff. So the next part is Python. And this should already be installed, but we're just going to make sure. So we're going to say sudo apt install Python 3. And you'll notice that it says that Python 3 is already the newest version. So we don't have to do that. But we do need a couple extra little components. So we're going to install those with sudo apt install Python 3 virtual environment. And this is going to make it so if you want to, you can run multiple instances of Python on your machine here. And then the next thing we're going to get is Python pip, which will help us install some of our packages like Flask, nice and easy. So we're going to install Python 3 pip. While that's going, let's keep looking here. And I'm going to show you the bonus because I like to use it myself. If you want FTP, so you can edit files on your host computer, which I think we do, we can install FTP. Now, this is what's really fun. Because again, you think, oh, this is going to be complex, but it's really not. Linux makes this really easy. We just install a server. So install virtual or VS FTPD, which is just open source software that lets us connect with something like FileZilla is what I use. So we're going to do that. And then let's edit the config file. So if you ever are a Linux admin, this is what you'll do all day is you'll edit these little config files, in which we're going to have a nice example here. So again, you can't use your mouse. You have to just use your arrow keys. And we are going to look for the line that says write enabled yes. Let's see, write enabled. And it's probably commented out. So let's look here. Right here. So it's commented out. So if we want to turn on this, we just got to make sure we uncomment the line. And then we're going to save it with Control O and then exit with Control X. And now we need to restart the server because we just changed its config. So we need to restart it so it gets its stuff. So we just say sudo service vs ftpd restart. And just like that, we have a FTP server running. So let's open up FileZilla here. And I'm going to make a new connection. So let's go here. Let's add a new site. I'm going to call this dev. I have a lot of these because I've done this a little bit. So our dev here, what we're going to do is we're going to set our host to our IP address again, 10.0.0.65. We can leave the port plain. It's plain FTP, not SFTP. And I'm just going to use plain FTP because I know it's going to use that anyways. And it can ask for a password. So I'm going to say, okay. Oh, and our user, we type in the same user that we have right here. So like mine's Tanner Crooked Dev. So the same thing you use to log on, we're gonna do right here. So I'm gonna say connect, and my password is developer again. And it's just gonna say, hey, you're using plain. I'm just gonna say, yeah, that's fine. And here we are, we're connected. And just to show you that we're connected, we can go all the way back here to our var, www, HTML. And here is our folder. And it's going to tell me right there. Yeah. So there is our hello world folder our file that we made earlier. So that's nice because that way we can edit files right here on our local machine. All right, we're moving kind of fast. I hope that's okay because I'm trying to get to the good stuff. Which is coming up really soon, because now we have everything we need, and now we're going to start setting up Flask. but I just wanted to pause. And does anyone have any questions about what we've done so far or what these things are? And it's okay to ask if you're like, well, like what does any of this do? Feel free to ask, because I have been moving fast and there is good write-ups here. Okay, Breton says I'm keeping up pretty well. Good. Okay. And don't feel free to stop me. If there's something you're like, whoa, like I have no idea, because I really want you to understand, and there's good write-up here, but I really want you to understand what each one of these is doing. I don't want you to just blindly follow the instructions. I want you to understand it, because that's when it's going to make the most sense. All right. So here we go. We're going to start getting started. Now I have some resources up here. I have a copy of this that I got from Humble Bundle. I'm sure you guys have heard of that before. This is a great book. It's basically what got me started. It's just very well written. It had a lot of answers for me. So that's the one that I kind of recommend if you ever look for a book. And like I said, it comes on Humble Bundle pretty frequently to where you can get that for like plus another ton of books for like $10 or something like that. But anyways, we're going to start setting that up, and we already have our lamp stack. So we are going to build the directory structure for Flask, because Flask kind of requires a set directory structure, and it just makes a lot of sense. So I kind of like it anyways. So we're going to go to cd var www. And from there, and I'm going to make this window just a tad smaller. Maybe blow it up just a tad so you guys can see. So we can make this a tad bigger. All right. And let me actually real quick zoom this just a tad. There we go. That should help just a little bit. Anyways. And it'll be down here at the screen. I'm sorry. That's kind of the way terminals work. All right. So we're going to go to cd var www, which is great. And then we're going to make a new directory. So we're going to say sudo make dir app. And this is going to be, this app directory is kind of going to be where our application sits, like all of it. So, and now we're going to do it so we want to make ourselves the owner of this folder. So we don't have to type sudo as much, because remember, sudo is what makes it so we can kind of say, hey, look, I'm an admin. Let me do whatever I want, kind of a thing. And it actually stands for super user do. So we're actually doing it as the super user. So let's take a look here. We're going to change our permissions. So we're going to say sudo change owner, or chown, and this is where you'll type in your username and then colon www-data, and then the name of the folder we want to change permissions to. So in this case, app. And so now if we take a look using the ls-al command, if we take a look at the app directory, you'll notice that I am now the owner and www-data is the group, and that's the group that's for the web server. So we let it be the group owner, so that way it has access to the files as well. And then you'll notice that HTML folder, it's still owned by root, which is why we couldn't do what we wanted without the sudo command. So now let's go into app, and now we don't need to type sudo as much. So let's start building our stuff. So we're going to make another directory called app. And this is where our application is going to really reside. So I like to make one folder that says, hey, this is an application. Most of the time I give it a name. So like if I was going to make one that was course catalog, like really that should have been course catalog, that first app. And then I have an app folder in there that kind of says, hey, this is the web app, because we're going to store some database resources in here as well. But anyways, let's continue. So we have our app, and now we want to make a couple more folders, and we can do this all with one command. So I'm going to say make directory, and we're going to do models. static, and then inside of there, styles, and then templates. So now we actually have 4 new folders. So if I do ls, I can see them. And if I go into static, there should also be a styles. And that's where we'll put a lot of our resources. And we can check to make sure if we go tree, and I don't have tree on there, so we'll just leave it like that. But it should look like this. There's the directory tree structure. All right, and now we're actually going to build our app.py. This is where we're going to kind of initialize Flask. And Flask is, we kind of have to initialize it so it knows how to run itself, essentially. So we're going to do that right here. So we're going to say, nano app.py. And I'm just going to take and copy this, and you can do the same. And I'm going to explain what this does. And remember, to paste, you kind of have to use Shift Control V. All right. So what this is we import some packages, and this is all Python. So from here, whenever we have a .py file, we're actually going to be writing in Python. So this is just Python stuff, and we have a couple packages. So we're going to import Flask, which is the whole kind of thing that kind of does it all. And then we're also going to import from Flask a function called render template. And that function is what we're going to use to actually display or render our web pages, which we'll build here in a minute. We create an application, which is a Flask app. So this is all just Python class stuff. And then we generate a secret key. Now, this secret key that I have, I've generated. And normally this is kind of your key, because if people get a hold of this, they could wreak havoc on your website. So you want to make sure to keep this safe. So don't use this one in a production server, I guess is what I'm saying. But that secret key is what helps keep Flask secure. It's what's going to encrypt things and do all that kind of fun stuff. And then right here, in Flask, we define routes. And by route, I mean URL. So if I define a route that just is a / like what we have there, basically this is going to be where people first go when they go to our website. And you can see that I defined it as index. So I say, hey, I'm making a new route. And when people go here, run this function. So when people go to this web page, or just to our URL, so this one right here eventually, it's going to return the words hello world, just like this, but it's spelled right. Notice that this one has an exclamation mark there. So nothing too crazy. And let's save that with Control O and Control X to exit. And notice that I put those commands right here just so you don't get confused. All right, and there is our app.py, and that's our main kind of script that's going to be the parent of all of our web application. So now what we want to do is we want to set up Python to actually run. So I'm going to say Python 3-m venv, and that stands for virtual environment. And the reason we do this is so that Python runs out of this little area, so to speak. Because sometimes we need to install different Python packages. And if we have 2 Flask applications running on the same server, if we don't use virtual environments, they're going to conflict. And so we don't want to do that. So I like to do this. It's just good practice. So to activate it, we type in source venv bin activate. And as soon as we do that, you'll notice you'll get this venv over here, and that means that we're in there. In fact, if I do which Python 3, you'll notice that it's actually exactly where we are, which is what we want, because we're using the Python 3 for this application. Now we can install some stuff. So we're going to say pip 3 install wheel. And these are all Python packages. And we use pip to install those. And this is the big one. This is where we get Flask. So pip 3 install Flask. You'll notice it downloads some stuff. and we're good. We're done. And now Flask is ready to go. Now the only problem is we have to basically tell Apache how to use Python, because it's just out of the box. It comes ready to show HTML and CSS, but not Python. So that's what we're going to do now. So let's go back a directory. So we are currently at var ww app, and we're going to create another file. And this is our WSGI file. And our WSGI file is kind of the in-between man between between Flask and Apache. And so in here, you'll notice this file, it's going to have a few things. You can just take and copy and paste that again. You'll notice that it has the same application secret. And I'll be honest, I don't know completely everything that this does at a high detail. I just know that I need it to run my Flask applications. I know that it imports it. Basically, it tells Apache when we install WYSIWYG how to do it. So we'll leave it at that so we don't get too technical. So shift, oh, whoops. Okay. I'm used to another one. So let's write that and exit. There we go. We have that. So now WSGI is ready to go. Now we just need to set up Apache. Now this is also where you would set up if you were going to run multiple websites off the same server. Let's go ahead and do this. So let's change some permissions. So we're going to say chown. And I think technically we're already there. But just to be sure, sudo chown -r. Oh, I know why, because we need to there we go. If we take a look at this file, you'll notice that our app.wsgi is not owned, it doesn't have the www data. So we need to change that. So we do sudo. So we go back here. We're going to say sudo chown -r, your username, www data, app, which we've done before. We want to make sure app has that. And then we're going to also change the group membership. So we're going to say that the owner can do whatever he wants with it. The group can do whatever he wants with it. Everyone else can only read it, which is just permissions. So now if we go in there and take a look at our, if we take a look at our app.wsgi file, we'll notice that it's www data, which is what we want. All right, so now let's install WSGI. So sudo apt install lib apache 2. I guess I need to spell it right. We're installing a library for Apache, and it is mod WSGI. We have to get a specific one for Python 3. So sudo apt install lib apache 2 mod WSGI py3. And that's going to install and have it all ready for us. So then we can say sudo a2 nmod WSGI. It should be installed by default, but yeah, so it says already enabled, but just to make sure. All right. And now we are going to edit our Apache config. Sorry, this seems like a lot, but it's not too bad because really we're doing a lot. We're not only building our web application, but we're also configuring the server as well. So what I would do for this, because this is way out of the scope of the class. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete all this. I think I can do that with Control K. So I'm just going to hit Control K, hold it until there was nothing left to delete. And then I'm just going to take and copy this right here and paste it in. But basically what this is doing is it's saying, look, use the Python in where we built it, right? var www app venv. That's what we built, that virtual environment Python, and then use our WSGI file that we put in there as well. And then the rest is just Apache stuff. Whoops. I keep doing that because I'm used to, whoops. Okay, what have I done? Escape. Okay, Control O to save it, Control X to exit. And there we go. So now we should be up to there. So now the moment of truth is we are going to restart Apache. Sudo service Apache 2 restart. Now this is where we have the moment of truth to make sure we did everything correct. And there we go. You'll notice that we get this hello, comma world. And this means that our Flask app is running and delivering as it should. I know that was a lot right through there. And I want you to know that you don't need to understand everything at this point, because it would just be too much. But this should get you started, because the nice thing is this, like especially this stuff that may be out of scope, we don't necessarily need to understand right now. Eventually you might need to understand it, but right now we don't. And it's going to be about the same for everything. The only thing that might change are these different file paths. And so that's what all you might need to know is, like, for example, here we're just saying, hey, our app directory, we're defining that so we can get to it. We're going to make a static directory so we can put images on there and all that kind of stuff. And then we restart to go. Does anyone have any questions up to this point? We're doing excellent, because this actually is the end of part 1. Let's go take a look at the overall one. Yeah, so that's actually the end of part 1. So if you got to this point, which shouldn't be too bad, we're now to the fun parts. The fun parts is where we actually get to do something fun. We actually get to start writing Python. We actually get to start doing that kind of stuff. And from here on out, I'm actually going to be using FileZilla, because we are going to start editing our files. You'll notice now that we have this app, and this is where we're going to live. This is our web application. So this is where we're going to start doing some stuff. I'm using the VM for the terminal, and copy and paste isn't working. You might need to. I don't know if, I want to say there's a way to do it, but I don't know off the top of my head. If you're using the virtual machine window, I'm not sure how to copy and paste into there. And I don't know if you need to install Ubuntu on Windows. If you do a Windows search, I think it's just a Windows S controlled, Windows S command, and then search for PowerShell. It'll open up a PowerShell one, and then you actually can SSH right from there like I did, and it should let you right in. Or yeah, shift in. I'm pretty sure there's a way. But yeah, that's one of the reasons why I actually like to use an actual application, is because they usually are a little bit easier. All right, great questions. Great question and all that kind of stuff. We've been moving fast. But it's good. The nice thing is it's all spelled out for you. So that actually is all kind of preparation. So if anything, just get through that, because now is the time that we're actually going to start having some fun, which will be really nice. So now in this tutorial, I actually have a lot of the files built for you, almost to the point where you could just download them and kind of get it running, which is what the instructions kind of get you to. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the database, since we have some time, because it's only 6, which means that it's only been an hour. I know that seems like crazy, but I knew this one would be a little longer, and I'm okay with that. In fact, I want it to be a little longer, because this is quite the tutorial, and I don't want to rush things too quick from here on out. because this is where it's actually going to start being important. So this part is where we're going to start building our database. And in fact, we're going to create the database ourselves. And this is kind of the side of things that you don't get to see too much in 225, because the student database is kind of already there for you. So this is, we're gonna get to see what it looks like from the ground up, to set up a database, set up a user, and all that kind of stuff. So the first thing we need to do is we need to become the root user. So I'm going to type in sudo su, which is for super user do switch user. And now you'll see that it says root at dev. And the big important thing is you see that there's this hash or pound number here instead of $. That means that we are the root user. Basically, it's a nice little symbol. Be careful because you can do damage. All right. And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to switch to the Postgres user. When we installed Postgres, it automatically creates a user just for being the admin of the database. So we're going to say switch user to Postgres. And now you'll notice that it says Postgres at dev. And we're back to a $sign because we're a normal user. But as this Postgres user, we have a few commands that we don't normally have access to. And the first one is the create DB command. And we're going to create this database, and it's going to be called course catalog. And because we're not in the right directory, it's going to say permission denied, but we can just ignore that. And in fact, if we go to cd space tilde thing, we'll go to our home directory, and then that won't happen anymore. All right, and now we're going to use create user catalog app. I like to create a specific user just for the computer to use, the application to use. And that's kind of what it's going to be if it's the catalog app user. And now we're going to give permissions, because we created the database, we created the user, but we need to give the user access to the database. So we open up, in Oracle, we use SQL+, but in Postgres, we use pSQL. So we'll type pSQL, and now you'll notice that we're kind of in a different prompt. It says Postgres equals number sign. So now we're going to connect, and this is where things are just a little different as far as syntax, as far as commands within, because in SQL+, we do different things, but here it's just a little different, but it's not too bad to get used to. You can always Google it. So we're going to connect to course catalog. So you see that it now says you are now connected to database course catalog as the Postgres user. And like I said, the Postgres user is the admin, so we can kind of do anything on that user. And we're going to give our user catalog app access. So we're going to say alter user. First, we're going to give it a password. We're going to say alter user catalog app with password. And I'm going to do mine as some secure password. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that for yours, but that's what I'm going to do for mine. Some secure password is there. And then I am going to grant all privileges on database. Course catalog to our user, which is catalog app. And grant. And just like we've been learning in class, and you'll see on your study guide, and why I actually like to do this in here, because that grant all privileges, basically we're saying, look, you can do whatever you want on that database catalog app user. What we just did with that grant and that the grant is a TCL transaction, or what's it? Oh, now I can't even remember off the top of my head. It's not transaction control because that's the commit. Anyway, there's a whole section of SQL, and I'm sorry I'm having a brain freeze on the topic. There's a whole section of SQL that's for these commands, so you actually get to see a grant in real life. All right, and now that we've done that, we are all set up to start developing on our database. So now I'm going to quit the utility with /q, exit the Postgres user, and then exit the root user. And now we should be right back to your username @dev. Now, if we try to connect now, so if we say pSQL course catalog app, you'll notice that it says that it failed, and that's on purpose. And that's because, like I said, Linux is pretty secure. And so by default, it says, I don't let people log in that just have passwords. They have to be a user on our computer to log in, but we can change that. So I'm going to say sudo nano. We're going to, again, change a config file. Etsy, PostgreSQL, 12, main, pg, hba.conf. This is the main config. This is the security config file for Postgres. And it has notes in here that explain all of the stuff, but we're just going to go right down to the bottom. And right here where it says local, we're going to change this line over here on the end. We're going to change this from peer to MD5, which is basically use a password instead of local authentication. So now what we're going to do is we're going to save and exit. Control O, Control X to save and exit. All right. Now there is one little thing here. In the same file, in fact, let's just change this while we're here because I want to show you this. The other thing we want to do is if you want to connect to this database from anywhere, like for example, if I wanted to connect to it from my laptop on an IDE like dbeaver, we can do that. We just have to change one thing. So we're going to add one file. And I'm going to say host all 0.0.0.0/0 to say, let me connect from anywhere and use peer. Technically, I think we can put MD5 here as well. I'm going to put MD5. We're going to Control O, Control X, and then sudo nano Etsy Postgres 12 main. And this is our main config file for Postgres. And basically, I'm going to say, hey, listen for connections outside of here. So you'll notice that right here, it says our listen address is localhost, which means I'm only going to accept connections from this computer, which is itself. So we have to be on this computer to get to it, but we don't necessarily want that. So we are going to just fix that. So it says listen to anywhere. We can connect to anywhere from here. Oh, and I keep doing that. Listen address. Control O, Control X. On the virtual machine, how many gigabytes of data can you store in the Postgres database? What would be the limit of the virtual machine? So the only limit is what you set when you create the virtual machine. You'll notice that when we created it, we set it to 20. So that means that we have up to 20 with our operating system. So you can see here that I have used 4.6 gigs of the 20, and that leaves around 14 gigs available. So if you have a big enough computer, if you're running on a big enough computer with a large enough disk, the only constraint is the size of your disk. The virtual machine doesn't really matter. It's actually a computer running. So the only thing that would constrict you is the size of your disks. Good question. But since we set ours to 20, obviously we can, with everything, we have 14 gigs of free space on our disk, our virtual machine disk. Now, what a lot of people do is they actually set up a small one like this, and then they put their database on another whole disk farm, essentially. But for development, it's kind of just overkill. So, but good question. If you're going to go start building stuff, maybe it's something you want to look at. The nice thing is we can always migrate our database if we run out of storage. So, good question. So I guess it's not really gigabytes. It's unlimited up to terabytes or whatever. All right. So now that we've done this, let's restart our PostgreSQL sudo service PostgreSQL restart. And now let's try to log in again. pSQL course catalog app. Oh, and what did we do here? I might have messed something up. Let's do this. Let's just check. I might have messed up my config file when I was mistyping. Well, it is active. So let's try that one more time. Yeah, I think I might have goofed up just a little bit. So let's try to, let me make sure that this is good here. Listen address is equal to that. Shouldn't be a problem. Was it listen addresses? Or did I think I might have typed that. I think it is supposed to be listen address. Let me make sure that and I keep doing that. I just need to use Vim. I'm used to Vim. Let's just exit out of there without saving. Let me make sure I didn't type a typo in here either. Oh, you know what it is, I think. Well, tell you what, let's just get rid of you. Oh, and I'm still doing it. Let's try that again. Control O. Control X. There we go. Let me make sure I didn't put some weird character in that thing somewhere when I was mistyping. Basically, I'm used to another command to edit files, and it's just let's just comment you out again. Control O, Control X, and let's try to restart this again. Okay, that looks like it might have been a little better. So let's try to connect again. pSQL course catalog. There we go. That's looking better. So somewhere I did something wrong. But we're going to go back and fix it here in just a minute. And then we're going to do your database password, which mine was some secure password. Which now we can see that we're logged in to course catalog. And then to quit, we just do \q. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and try to fix those files here real quick. So we're going to start with this one. We're going to uncomment our listen address. And we're going to try to get the common. We're going to see if we can find out where this is broken. And I'm going to guess that that's it. Yep. What do you know? And you know, I wonder if it's the tab. Let's try this. Tick, star, tick. Listen underscore address. Let's try that. Then we'll try listen underscore addresses. Because maybe they changed this config file. Seems unlikely, but we'll try it. Okay, so I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I guess for now, let's just comment it out until I have time to take a look. Because we should be able to just go like normal as is right now. So let me restart this. Make sure we can connect. Some secure password. We can, we're good. All right, so we'll just continue here because I'm not sure what I did to break whatever that was, but we can worry about it some other time. All right. All right, so now we're going to start building our database because now we have our course catalog database. We just need to put stuff in it. So to get it, what we're going to do is we are going to download the script to get it. And I'm going to show you what this is real quick because like I said, I kind of want to talk about this just a little bit. So this is where we get to exactly what we've been learning. And you're going to notice that there's some pretty common stuff, just like always. So here's my cleanup where I drop tables if, you know, just so that's rerunnable. And then I create a system user table. And you'll notice that this looks pretty familiar to what we've used in the past. I create a default system user. And then I create a catalog year. And then so I create one. And this one just happens to be for the 1920 school year with the end year 2020. Then I create a school. And in this case, I create a school called Shire High School. We're going to make some hobbits get educated. And then credit type. You'll notice that I have some basic credit type stuff here. And the whole idea of this is that we have a course catalog for each school. So you'll notice that here we have a catalog. It has a school ID and a catalog year. So every year we're going to have new course catalogs. And we can roll those up. We can do lots of stuff because basically we're going to, every year courses may change, right? So we're going to have a catalog for each year. And this is where your database design starts because you have to say, okay, can schools share a course catalog? So for example, I decided to do mine this way, but where I work, the school district that I help with, we have district catalogs. And that way all the courses are at a district because we do a lot of online learning, which is really nice given right now with COVID. But that way a student in our district, it doesn't matter if they're at this high school or this high school or this high school. If they want to take a computer science class, let's say computer science isn't offered at their high school, they can look in the course catalog and see that it's offered from this other school and they can take that course online virtually. So this is where you have to start making design decisions, or more importantly, you have to talk to the person you're working for and decide, how do we want this to work? Because believe it or not, a lot of those concepts, those talks, all the business logic, it starts here in the database. In fact, a lot of it is only defined here in the database. So this is database design is a very important step that takes a lot of planning and thinking about. Because like in this case, if we wanted this to be a higher level catalog, we probably wouldn't include school ID in the catalog table. But in this case, we're going to. Every school has its own catalog. And then we have the course table, and the course table is kind of going to be where the meat of the whole concept of this idea is, right? Is because we want to see what courses are. So I have a course table, and then I insert into course. You'll notice in the course table, I have a couple things like the catalog ID. That's what ties it to a catalog. I give the course a number, like for example, CS101 is the course number. The name is Introduction to Web Development. I even have a database column for a video link, because maybe we want to have like a little video for every course about what the course is all about, kind of a thing, kind of do some course marketing type stuff. How many credits is this worth? What type of credit is it worth? And is it active or not? Because basically, what if we want to say, hey, this course had some issues, or we decided last minute not to do this course? We don't necessarily want to delete it. We just want to make it inactive. Or let's say, hey, we're not sure if we're going to have this course or not. So I like to always put active on things, because that way it's easy to turn off, and we can program that logic into our web server, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. So there's the database design. This file is called course catalog init. And we're going to download that file so we can run it on our server, and we can just download it with this command, wget. So we're just going to go there, hit wget, and now there is this course catalog.init.sql file right here waiting for us. So let's run it. So we're going to log into our stuff, and this is just like we did in class, right? We wrote our scripts, and then we ran them, and that's what we're going to do right now. Some secure password, and apparently I didn't type right. There we go. And so to run our files, we do a \, and then we do the name of the file. So in this case, course catalog init.sql. And you notice we get these errors, and that's because we dropped them. But let's just run it again, and now we won't get the errors, just like we did in class many a time. If you do a drop table and it doesn't exist, it's not going to be able to drop it. But if we rerun it, it works great. And now it's connected. Now it's all there. So now we can say, select everything from course. And it's just like we've always done in our classes. We can query that information, see it. So let's exit with a \q. Right back to where we were. All right. And now we are ready to, now that we have our database, we're going to start connecting this to our Flask. So from here, we're going to do, we got to install one more thing. We're going to say sudo apt install Postgres SQL server dev 12. And that's basically going to install the connection so we can connect Python and Postgres together, which is important. Basically the dev package. We're getting the development package so we have all the cool development stuff. And while that installs, let's take a look at where we're at. We're ready to move on to the next one here. All right. Now, so what we've done is we kind of built everything here for us. And I have you build, so our app directory here, I have you build this whole file structure out so that you can see how to do it yourself. But what I'm going to do, just to make it easier, I've built quite a few things for you. And you can actually just git clone those and use it. So for example, if I was going to do this, I would say move var www app var www app.back. And basically what I did is I moved our app folder to be app.backup. So you always have a copy of it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the pre-built files. And I do this just so those who aren't into programming as much don't have to do it. And then we're just going to rename that to be app. And there we have it. So now we are, we have our app and app.back, but app is our main one. So if I go in here now, you'll notice that there's a few things that are here, such as if I go into templates, there's actually some files already in there, which we will talk about because I actually kind of want to, we'll walk through it because what we'll do is we'll build a whole nother template so you guys can see the actual process. But anyways, let's connect our Python. So the first thing we need to do is we need to redo a couple steps. And so we need to be Python -m venv Python 3, sorry. -m. And then source, let's actually deactivate. Let's do source, then bin activate, which Python 3. And we're still there. We're all still set up. So now we're going to do this. And this is kind of the nice part about this is instead of having to manually say pip install stuff, I already have it all here for us in this requirements.txt. So we can say pip install -r for recursive requirements.txt, and it's going to actually go through and it's going to install Flask. It's going to install SQL Alchemy. It's going to install all this other stuff up. And it looks like we had one error, and the one error, actually, I don't know if we did. Let's try again. Oh, it's just the wheel, which is fine. There we go. Yep, we're good. It says if you get an error, try installing wheel first, which it's good. Wheel doesn't do anything besides just some utility stuff. So now what we need to do is we need to make sure we connect to our database because you might have set a different password. So this is where I'm going to start using FileZilla so we can see this just a little bit better. So if I go in here into app and then I go into models, there's this connection.py file. So I'm going to view edit this. Get rid of some of these other stuff that's been getting worked on. So we have fresh, clean slate here. There we go. All right, and here you'll notice that this is our string that we use to connect stuff to. And this is our user catalog app. So all we need to do is change our password, which is right here. And mine was some secure password. So some secure password. Now I'm going to save that. When I save that, it's going to say, yeah, let's make sure it saves up to the server. There we go. And then we also need to change our app.py. Because you'll see the same thing right here. So we're going to change this to some secure password or whatever you put. We're going to save that. Make sure it gets uploaded right up there. All right. And at this point, we're ready to go, actually. And like I said, I will show you how this works, how the Flask actually works here in a second. But just for those who wanted to see a working example, I'm going to restart the server. We're going to refresh our web page here. And you'll notice things look quite a bit different. Now we're getting this course catalog stuff here. If I click on schools, you'll notice we get this Shire High School. And then if I click view, we can see the course catalog for the 1920 school year. And then here we can actually see our course. And we can add a course. Let's try one. Let's do CIT225 database. Let's say that it is a vocational credit type, and it is 1 credit in. And now you'll notice that now we get 2, and you can add courses. Now, normally you would put this behind something else, you know, like authentication or something similar. But just so you can see, we actually just use this to add data to our database, which is pretty cool. You can see the URLs happening there. All right. And before we go on any further, anyone have any questions up to this point? We're right on track at an hour and a half. But now we're going to actually dive in because we're going to build a page from scratch so you can kind of see it, which is not in the tutorial instructions, by the way. This is where, if you're just going for your grade, this is where you would be done right here. Just so you know. So if this is as far as you want to go, this is as far as you need to go, or similar. So, but I'm going to show you how this works on the back end in just a second. But this is all that's actually required for the lab. So as long as you can get it up and running. All right. Does everything somewhat make sense? Not that you have to, you know, I don't expect that you'd be able to just up and do it. But do you understand, I guess, the concepts, or, you know, kind of the idea behind what we were doing? Oh, so to turn it in, all I need is a screenshot. Just take a screenshot of this running right here, of this web page, maybe add a course just for fun, and then submit it. It's just a screenshot. Because for this lab, I want it to be fun. It's not like you know, a lot of this is outside of the scope. But I just want you to see that it is useful, that, you know, you're learning databases to be able to build something useful, not just have a database running on a server to practice with, essentially. All right, so let's build a page from scratch. And I kind of want to really kind of dive into this because this is what makes Flask so cool. And I know some people are very much interested in Flask and in Bootstrap. So we're going to build a page completely from scratch. And we're going to make it pull, because we can view a course here. Actually, we don't have a view course. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a page to view some course information. Because right now you'll notice that these view buttons don't really do anything. So we're going to build that from scratch here. And so you can see just how easy it is once we're all connected. So let's go right here to get started. Let's go to, and I guess let me explain a little bit. We have a couple folders here. The first one is our views. And if we go in our views, you'll notice that these are all .py files. And we're going to create a new file. And we're going to call it course.py. Let's go ahead and open that in our editor here, course.py. And just so you can see, we're going to also open this catalog.py so we can kind of see what's going on. And then the other relevant stuff is in this templates. So if we look at this templates right here, we can go in here and we can see that there's a catalog in school. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a whole new directory called course. And we're going to go in course. And this is where we're actually going to put our HTML files. So like if we go under catalog, you'll notice that there's an add course.html or view catalog.html. And then I also have a couple of these, and these are where we define some of our templating stuff, which we'll talk about here in just a second. So let's go into course. We're going to create a new file and we're going to call it courseinfo.html. Let's edit this too. So basically, we're going to be dealing with this course.py and course.info.py. So, and the way this works is, I'm sure everyone's heard of the model view controller paradigm. And the model is our database, right? That's our classes. That's our data model. And then our view is the backend server. No, the controller is our backend server logic, and that's our Python. And then the view is actually the HTML that's rendered here. It's the user interface, so to speak. So we're going to use that same paradigm in Flask, where our model is Postgres, which we have. Database is up and working. The controller is Python, and we're going to write the Python to build our stuff. And then the view is our HTML and CSS, which we're going to use Twitter Bootstrap, which will be really nice. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to build our controller. Now, if we take a look at catalog.py, what makes Flask really nice is the fact that we can, and I'm just going to take all this for right now. We're going to copy this, all of our dependencies, and we'll talk a little bit about what each one does. But what makes Flask really nice is the fact that we can build different routes really easily. So in this case, we're dealing with a course. And so what I want to do is I actually want to make a blueprint, which in this case, in terms of Flask, a blueprint is kind of like, I like to think of it like a folder in a sense. And so basically what we're going to do is we're building a blueprint called course that we're going to use to basically build our URLs. We're going to lump all these together with a prefix, because if we take a look here, we have catalog. Yep, there we go. So once we build our blueprint, we need to register it. So let's go app.register blueprint course. I guess I need to change this here too. Course, there we go. And we need to import it. So from views.course, import course. And basically what we're doing there, for those who aren't familiar with Python, we have this as a variable. And over here, we're just saying, hey, import this from that file, because we got to tell Flask that these URLs exist, essentially is what we're doing there. And we can get rid of a lot of this stuff. So let's get rid of all this right there. Save. Okay. So that's what we need. Now we already have some boilerplate, because you'll notice here that we have models that for course, which basically we have some pre-built Python, which is really nice because Python is, we can generate these, but I didn't want everyone to have to do it all, obviously. But if we take a look at this file, models.py, you'll notice that I already have classes set up. And what's cool is these are actually already connected to our database. They match exactly what's in our database. So we have this course thing here and it matches perfect what's in our database. And we're going to use that like crazy. So what we're going to do is we are going to build a route, which basically is just a URL. So we're going to say at course.route. Because like if we take a look over here, we're saying we're building a route, and then we're going to build a function for it that's going to run every time that we need it to do something. So let's give our route a URL. So from here, we're going to say a course. And in this case, we want to pull the course ID. You'll notice that when we're up here, so let's actually go back to our home page. This is what makes Flask really nice. And it's kind of, when you start doing this, you're going to notice that you're going to pay a lot more attention to URLs because you'll know how they're built. So up here, I have my IP address, and then we have a school and all. But if I click on view for Shire High School, now you'll notice that I have school and 1. And 1 is the school ID of Shire High School. So for example, if I actually log into pSQL course, if I actually do select everything from school, school ID 1 is Shire High School. Furthermore, if I take a look at courses, like let's take a look at CIT225. Well, I guess that's what we're building. We want it to pull. So if I select everything from course, you'll notice that course ID 1 is the intro to web development. Course ID 2 is database development design. So what we want it to do is whenever we go to course 1, we want it to pull up whatever course ID 1 is, and so on and so forth. And so basically that's what we're going to build it to do. And the way we do that is we say int course ID. Oh, whoops. Yep. So we want to make sure we're going to pull the course ID here. All right. And you can see that we've done the same thing here. And then we can define some methods. If we were going to do get and post within it, basically what is allowed. In this case, since we're using a parameter in the URL, we do require get. So we're just going to enable get right there for this route. Now we're going to define our function, and we're going to say course info. And since we're getting course ID, we're going to pass that into that function. Now let's just try this. So we're going to just say return, and we're just going to put some manual stuff in here. We're just going to say course ID. We're just going to make sure this works real quick. So we're going to return course ID in a window, essentially. Now where's FileZilla? There you are. All right. Now every time we make a change to a template, we kind of have to restart it. Just good practice. So sudo service Apache 2 restart. Now that I have this defined, I should be able to go here. Oh, but we're getting an error. This is perfect. We actually want to see this. So if I go tail var log Apache 2 error.log, I can see this, and it says, hey, permission denied to your course.py. Oh, and that's right, because we built this this file in FileZilla. So what we can do is if you use FileZilla, we can just change it, or you can change it like we did the permissions to the other ones. So if I go into my views and this course.py, you'll notice that it's got some pretty stingy stuff. So we're just going to edit these file permissions. We're going to set it to 774. Let's restart that server again. And again, we're getting another error. So let's just make sure. And you'll see that it says malformed URL rule. And so I have something messed up in my code here. So let's go take a look. And it's malformed because I'm not sure why. Course int. Oh, I'm missing my last little bracket. So let's save you, restart our server, and we're still getting something. Let's take a look again. Oh, I saved it, but it didn't actually upload to the server. There we go. Let's try that. Okay, so now we're one step further. Now we're just getting some last thing. So now it's saying this is Python. You can only concatenate string, not int. Oh, and that makes sense because this is an integer. So what we need to do is we can change this to a string since we're just outputting it to HTML. So let's restart here again. And now you'll notice we get 1. Now what's cool is right now, because we have, turn that off so we don't get notifications every time we upload, I can change this to whatever I want right now. We don't actually have a course that is 5, but I can change this to whatever I want and it's going to display it as long as it's an integer. But what's cool about that is now we have that parameter that we can now use to query our database. Or, yeah, so we can query our database and show some information. So that's what we're going to do. And if we take a look basically at our stuff here, we can use some functions. Now we could just write out the stuff manually. So we could actually, we could say db session dot query, and we could actually just say select everything from course where course ID is equal to course ID, blah, blah, blah. But we have these nice little connections, and this is called Sql Alchemy. And this is what we can do to connect data to our pre-built classes. Now, we're not going to be writing SQL manually, but what's nice is it uses the same concepts. So what we're going to do is we want, in this case, we just want to get the course information. So we're going to say db underscore session dot query, and we want to get course, and we want to filter on course ID is equal to course ID. So whatever we pass in there, we want to get. Now, in this case, this is our primary key. So we only want one result. We're only expecting one result. So let's say result is equal to that return. So now what I can say is instead of printing out the course ID, let's print result.name. And we should get our course name. Let's see how we did. Let's try with 1 first. Oh, and did I restart this? There we go. Introduction to web development. And now if we change this to a 2, we should get database development and design. So we kind of have our controller working because what we have here is we have access to all of our course information based on our course ID. So what we're going to do now is instead of returning this static stuff, we're going to build a template. And this is our course info.html. Now in Flask, we use what's called Jinja templating. And Jinja is a markup that lets us do really cool stuff with SQL. So what I have in this file is I have this base.html, and this is actually our root template. And it has like our nav bar, because we don't want to have to type our nav bar every time, right? And this is stuff that I think you learn in CIT225 kind of stuff. So we don't want to have to type our nav bar every time. And so basically we have these blocks defined, and we can override these blocks or we can inherit them. And so inside of this empty.html, I have a nice little template here that we can use to put in here. And you'll notice that whenever we want to add things, we can add these different blocks or we can take them away. So if I don't want a sidebar or a nav bar changes, I'm just going to delete these and it'll be gone. It'll still be there in the page, but I don't have to see them in my actual file because I like to keep files small. I don't want to have to rebuild everything. So where this doesn't have it, because it extends base.baseh.html, it's going to have all this stuff in there unless I override it, which is really nice. So we're going to leave that off. And all we want to change is our content. So let's go in here to our content. And this is where we're going to start doing some actual Twitter Bootstrap stuff. So if you've never used Bootstrap, it's a must use because I'm going to show you how fast we can go from a plain Jane web page to something. So first of all, we have this course info.html. Let's get it up here. And we probably ought to change file permissions on that as well. So let's go into our templates course. We're going to edit file permissions, and we're going to recurse into subdirectories 774. Just to make sure. Course info right there. All right, so now we have that. Let's edit our controller. And instead of returning this, we want to return render template. And what template are we going to return? Course info.html. So basically we're saying, look, I want you to render this template. So let's restart our server. Well, let's make sure it gets uploaded. Restart our server. And of course, it's going to throw a fit. We get a template not found. And the reason being is because if we take a look here, we have course info.html, course-info.html. Did I rename that courses? Let's go in here. Course. Yeah, that should work unless. Unless it just doesn't have the right permissions. So let's go check those permissions again. See who the owner group. Yep, that's good. Oh, and I think we're missing the execute. So let's go that and try that maybe. Yeah, let's see how that worked. Okay. There we go. Okay, so you'll notice that by default, we have, with what we had in this code right here, we don't have any content. We have all the other stuff. We have our header. We have all that stuff. We just don't have any content because we haven't put anything in that block yet. So what we want to do is we want to put some stuff in this block. And specifically, we want to be able to do it quickly. So this is where Twitter Bootstrap comes in really nice. So we're going to start off with a div. And like I said, Twitter Bootstrap is all about classes. So what I always like to do is I like to start with a container fluid, which is a full width container. So let's do a container fluid. And let's say we want the background to be white, BG white. Let's try that. And then in here, let's put a Jumbotron. So we're going to say div class equals Jumbotron. And we're going to say that inside this Jumbotron, we're going to put the course name. Now, this is where it gets really cool to have a Jinja. So if we ever want to include data from our database or from our controller, we can put that in curly brackets. And so in this case, I'm going to say course dot name. Okay, let's start with that. So course dot name. So now let's go to our controller here, and we're going to just say, we're going to pass that in. We're going to say course is equal to, course is equal to result. So now we have this course value variable, which we're going to use here. And that's going to have all of our course information. So let's go ahead and restart here. And now we have our design and development. And if we change this to a 1, all of a sudden it's introduction to web development inside of a Jumbotron. Now you'll notice that it's kind of, like there's no gaps here. It's kind of weird. So let's fix that just a little bit. Inside of our container, we're going to add padding on the inside, and we want a big, nice pad. So we're going to say padding 4 for the largest pre-built padding. And that is our that's our title. Now we want to add a couple more stuff. So let's say inside we want another say div class equals container. Let's we want to put some information about the course here. So let's put our description. So let's say course.description. Right. Let's see what that looks like. I guess I need to make sure it gets uploaded. I should just really turn that on to do that automatically. An introduction to full stack development with Flask. Let's try it with this one. The best class ever. So you can see where we're kind of going. Now we can start building very quickly now that we have access to our data. So let's keep going. Just a couple more things here. So we have our description. Let's actually build div class equals container. Well, we have our description. Yeah, let's do a container here. And we're going to make this rounded, bordered, border. And we are going to put some information in here. So we're going to say H4, and we're going to say credits. Course.credits. And then we're going to say H4 credit type. Course.credit type. Now, I hope that that is, let's, we have that file here somewhere, I thought, objects. Well, I hope that the credit type's the right name of that is what I'm worried about. We'll check it here in just a minute, though. Okay, so our credit type, you'll notice that this one we get some this, and that's because we need to do a join because credit type is a credit type object, which means that it's a foreign key, just like we've connected to a few other things. So let's go to take a look at our controller. And so what we probably should do here is we need to see what type of credit type this is. So let's check to make sure we get a result. So let's say if result does not equal none, basically if it exists, then we want to get the credit type. So we're going to say credit type is equal to dbSession.query. We're going to query the credit type object, but we're going to join it on a course dot credit type is equal to credit type dot what did I use there? Let's take a look at our model. Oh, let's see. Course catalog credit type is a foreign key to credit type ID. And we want then we want to filter our course.course ID is equal to course ID. You can see how we're basically using SQL here, just in functions. So let's do that. And then we need to pass it in, obviously. So let's pass in the credit type is equal to credit type. Pass that value in so we actually have it. And then if we go back to our course info, now instead of doing course.credit type, we're going to do credit type dot credit type, and actually it'll be dot name. because it's a whole different table. So let's restart our server here. Reload up, and we get a boo-boo, and I bet you it's because course has no attribute credit type. And that's because right here I did course.credit underscore type. Let's try that. Let's restart our server, and we're still getting an error, so let's take a look. Neither org. Okay, so it looks like there's something weird going on with the credit type. I obviously pull it somehow, but I'm obviously doing something wrong. Let's take a look here. Credit type. Oh, it looks like I actually get a drop down. Credit type ID. It has no. Deep session credit type. Oh, this is why right here. Join, there we go. Because when we do our joins, we actually already have it pre-built. So we actually don't need to define them manually, which is really nice. There we go. And I guess let's make sure that it gets added there. There we go. So now we can see that we have a nice little thing here, and you can see that we're doing it very quickly. But we're at 2 hours now, so I don't want to go too much, especially on the recording. But I hope you guys get the picture. Is this making sense to everybody? Is it kind of? I know it's a lot, but I'm hoping it kind of gives you a platform where you can start playing. Because once you get to this point, it's not too bad because you can start building URLs pretty easily, and then you just add your logic. So like if you said you've been building a lot of sites with PHP, basically you can switch it to Python, which is really nice because then you have all access to all the Python libraries, which can do a lot. And you also have access to Jinja, which means that you have to write much less HTML on that end too, because we can, with just this little bit of code, we can add our own stuff. So it's basically page relevant. Yeah, it makes it a lot nice. Yeah, Flask is kind of built with the idea of simplicity, which is really nice. And hopefully with Bootstrap too, you kind of get to see a little bit of that in here as well, because you can see that I haven't built any CSS, but I can make it look really nice just by using those built-in CSS classes that Bootstrap has to offer. Like the container rounded and border does all this for me, which is really nice. In fact, let's give that a padding. Make it look nice. Yes. But anyways, that's where I will leave the recording. So you definitely don't have to get this far for the lab. Like I said, you can just get it to where it's running and call it good if you want. But I hope you kind of experiment and maybe try to build something. Oh, and I guess before we end, we've built this nice little page here that we can now use. So let's go ahead and add that. So inside of our, I believe it's our, because now that we have it, we might as well use it. So let's go over here to here, and we need to go into our templates, and we are going to look at the catalog. And our view catalog file, we're going to view edit, because in here we have our view button right here that didn't work, if you remember. So what we want to do is we want to make it so this works. Now, the other really nice part about Flask is we don't have to manage URLs, because normally you'd have to type, localhost course. But then the problem is what course number are we throwing in here? So you'd have to kind of do all that. We're going to let Flask manage it for us, because what if we change the URL? So we're just going to say, hey, just use the function. So we're going to say URL for course dot course info. I think that's what we called it. Yep, course info. So course info, and we're going to pass a parameter, and that parameter is course ID is equal to course ID. And we just put them in those curly brackets. We're going to save that, make sure it gets uploaded, restart our server. And so now we can go back to our course catalog where we want it to be. Go into our schools, go into our catalog. And like if we want to see our CIT development design, we can click this, and now we actually go where we want to go. And now we can, well, that one throws an error, probably because it doesn't have a credit type attached to it. But CIT2, so let's add another one real quick. CIT120. The most important thing you learn is computer restarts. It's vocational. Learn to solve all problems. Starting the device. Save. All right, so now we can actually go in. We have our CIT120, and we can click this, and there we go. We have our computer restarts. So that's pretty cool. And then you can start building from there and just go step by step, page by page. Yeah, it works great. I like it. I prefer it over PHP simply because there's a lot of quality of life stuff, and specifically packages. Because if you want to ever do math or stuff like that, Python has a plethora of great libraries that you can just import and use. So, but anyways, we're to that point. So I will let you guys go and start playing around with it, and good luck this week.